A quiet Houston street. The afternoon sun spills across cracked pavement. A single manhole cover gleams faintly. Ordinary, ignored, but hiding something unspeakable. She was 37, full of plans, messages left unanswered, dreams interrupted mid-sentence. And then, nothing. Weeks turned into months, and the city moved on. But somewhere beneath those streets, a secret waited. Until one man, haunted by what he'd done, whispered the words that would finally end the search. Stay with me, because this is how a woman's sudden disappearance unraveled into a story buried deep beneath Houston's surface, and how the truth finally clawed its way out.
Before the headlines, before the police tape and the searches, there was simply Brittany, 37 years old, a woman who moved through life with quiet kindness. Friends said she never passed anyone in need without stopping. Her mom remembered how she'd check in with her every morning, just to make sure she was okay. That was Brittany. Gentle, reliable, someone you didn't have to ask twice. She lived in Sugar Land, Texas, a calm suburb where everyone knew each other's cars and waved at neighbors from driveways. Inside her small apartment, the world felt peaceful. A shelf lined with family photos, a coffee mug chipped at the handle that she refused to throw away, her favorite blanket always folded neatly at the end of the couch. On her wrist, a small tattoo, simple but meaningful, a quiet piece of identity she carried everywhere. She loved animals, often feeding strays that wandered near her porch. She wasn't rich or famous, but she made people feel seen, and that's what her loved ones remember most. There was no chaos in her life, no dark secrets anyone could see, just a woman trying to do right by others, one small kindness at a time. It's those ordinary moments that make what happened next so unbearable. Because when Brittany vanished, it wasn't just a person who disappeared, it was the calm, familiar rhythm of a life that once made sense.
June 25th, 2018, a Monday like any other in Sugar Land, Texas. The air was heavy with summer heat, the kind that clings to your skin and slows the day down. At around 2 p.m., Brittany Leigh Burfield was seen for the last time. She'd spoken with friends that morning, casual, calm, nothing strange, nothing that hinted at what was coming. Her car was parked outside her apartment on Ilona Lane, a quiet, residential stretch where families walked dogs and sprinklers ticked across green lawns. But sometime after that afternoon hour, the world seemed to lose track of her. No more texts, no more calls. Her phone fell silent. When her family couldn't reach her, panic crept in fast. Days later, police entered her apartment, and what they found shattered the calm that once defined her home. Drawers pulled open, items scattered, a scene that spoke of struggle or intrusion or both. The small sanctuary she'd built for herself suddenly felt cold, broken, violated. By then, Brittany was gone, leaving behind only half-finished life and a growing list of questions that no one could yet answer.
The day after Brittany vanished, her mother's phone lit up with a text. It was from Brittany's number. At first glance, it looked normal, but something about the tone wasn't her. The phrasing, the rhythm, it felt wrong, like someone else pretending to speak in her voice. Her mother knew it in her gut. Hours turned into days, and that uneasy feeling grew heavier. Then came another shock. Brittany's car was found abandoned near Richmond, close to Beltway 8. The driver's seat pushed back farther than she would have kept it. Personal items left behind, untouched.
It was as if she had simply stepped out and vanished into thin air. Search teams poured into the area, volunteers, officers, cadaver dogs moving slowly through thick brush and sweltering heat. Every rustle of wind felt like a whisper of hope, but nothing surfaced. No trace of Brittany, no sign of where she'd gone or who had taken her there. Each small discovery only deepened the dread. Someone had her phone. Someone had driven her car. And whoever it was, they were already steps ahead. When investigators pulled Brittany's phone records, a single entry stood out, one that made no sense. After she was reported missing, her phone had been used to place a call, not to a friend, not to her family, but to a parole officer. The name attached to that officer's file, Alex Jerome Haggerty. It was a quiet, technical detail, but it changed everything. The kind of mistake only someone careless or desperate would make. Police didn't need to guess anymore who had her phone. They could see it, time-stamped and traceable. That one digital breadcrumb connected the missing woman to a man with a violent past, and it was enough to turn suspicion into pursuit. While investigators chased leads and gathered evidence, Brittany's mother, Tricia Valentine, refused to sit still. She printed flyers until her hands ached, taped them to streetlights, grocery store windows, and gas station doors. Each one carried the same soft-eyed photo of her daughter and the same question no one could yet answer. Where is Brittany? The community rallied around her. Neighbors who had never met Brittany showed up to search fields and drainage ditches. Volunteers walked for miles through the Texas heat, calling her name into the wind, refusing to believe she could just vanish. Vigils were held in church parking lots, candles flickering, prayers whispered, faces streaked with tears and exhaustion. News cameras captured Tricia's voice, trembling but steady. She spoke directly to whoever had her daughter. "Please, just tell me where she is." It was a mother's plea that echoed through Houston, pulling strangers into her fight. In those weeks, fear spread quietly through Sugarland, the kind that settles deep, making people double-lock doors and glance over shoulders at night. But beneath that fear was something stronger, a stubborn, aching hope that Brittany might still come home. As summer turned to fall, Brittany's name began to fade from headlines, but never from her mother's lips. Weeks bled into months, and the silence became its own kind of torment. Calls went unanswered. Leads dried up. The search teams went home, leaving behind empty fields and memories of hope that once felt certain. Without a body, justice hung in limbo. Still, a grand jury moved forward, indicting Alex Jerome Haggerty for Brittany's murder, a charge built on fragments and faith. But indictments don't ease the ache of not knowing. The holidays came and went, her mother setting an empty plate at the table, praying for something, anything, to change. The media had moved on, but Tricia hadn't. Each day she waited by the phone, still believing that somewhere out there the truth was struggling to surface.
It was August of 2019, more than a year since Brittany vanished, when the case finally cracked open. The break didn't come from new technology or another search warrant. It came from a man already behind bars. Alex Jerome Haggerty, the same man long accused, now said he was ready to talk. But not to detectives. He reached out to Houston activist Quanell X, a name known for stepping into the gray spaces between the streets and the system. The two met, and under that pressure, Haggerty began to unravel. What he said would send police racing to one of the city's oldest neighborhoods, Houston's 3rd Ward. There, on the 3100 block of Hadley Street, stood a manhole cover in the middle of the road. Sunlit, ordinary, the kind people drive over every day without noticing. But on this day, it was surrounded by police tape, detectives, and the quiet hum of disbelief. HPD officers and Texas EquaSearch founder Tim Miller stood shoulder to shoulder as crews worked to pry open the rusted seal. When the cover finally lifted, the air went still. 9 feet below, a narrow concrete chamber held standing water, dark, cold, and silent. Flashlights cut through the gloom, and in that moment, hope and dread collided. What they found at the bottom was unmistakable. Human remains, later confirmed to be Brittany Leigh Burfield. For over a year, her mother had searched fields, rivers, and streets, never imagining her daughter was hidden beneath one. The discovery ended the search, but it began a new kind of grief, the kind that seeps into every breath and never leaves. On that Houston street, where traffic rolled by as if nothing had changed, a family's world finally stopped. What began with a single disappearance had now come full circle, and the truth, long buried beneath the city, had finally surfaced.
After the recovery, the remains were turned over to the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, the quiet final step in a search that had shaken Houston. Through DNA analyses, the identification was conclusive. The remains found deep within that manhole were those of Brittany Leigh Burfield. But the science could only go so far. The time underground, the standing water, and the conditions of the chamber had erased much of what might have told investigators how she died. The autopsy confirmed who she was, but not precisely what had happened in her final moments. Outside the lab, rumors began to swirl. In various statements, both public and reported in case files, Alex Haggerty allegedly gave conflicting explanations. To some, he claimed she'd been shot. To others, stabbed or suffocated. In another version, he mentioned drugs. None of those accounts have ever been forensically verified or confirmed in official records. In the end, science gave answers to where Brittany was, but not how her life had been taken. Those contradictions, left hanging in the air, became their own kind of haunting silence, a reminder that even the truth once found can still come fractured. Alex Jerome Haggerty wasn't a stranger to the system. By the time his name surfaced in connection with Brittany's disappearance, he was already on law enforcement's radar. A man with a criminal past, out on parole, navigating the fragile line between freedom and return. Investigators first encountered him not through Brittany's case, but after a separate domestic violence arrest. During that search, pieces of Brittany's world began turning up where they didn't belong. Her clothing, her belongings, found in his yard on Drew Street in Houston's 3rd Ward. It was a discovery that changed everything. The picture that emerged was chilling. A man who knew Brittany, who had access to her, and who now stood surrounded by her possessions. Detectives didn't need to speculate on coincidence. The evidence pointed straight toward him. As the investigation deepened, prosecutors moved quickly. Haggerty, already in custody for the unrelated charge, was formally accused of Brittany's murder. A grand jury agreed, indicting him even before her remains were found. In court filings and interviews, Haggerty's story shifted over time, but his connection to Brittany never did. He was the last known link in a chain that began with her disappearance and ended in tragedy. What drove him? Was it impulse, anger, or something darker still? That answer, even now, remains locked inside a man who has already said too much and not nearly enough. In the end, the courtroom became the only place left for justice to speak. Alex Jerome Haggerty stood before a Harris County judge and entered a plea, guilty to the murder of Brittany Leigh Burfield. There would be no trial, no drawn-out testimony, no chance for the family to hear him explain why. The plea brought a sentence of 30 years in prison, 3 decades behind bars for a life taken far too soon. For prosecutors, it was the legal closure they'd pursued for years. For Brittany's mother, it was something different, a mixture of relief and unhealed pain. The word guilty confirmed what her heart had known since the day Brittany vanished, but it didn't bring her daughter home. When the gavel fell, the courtroom fell silent. Justice, at least on paper, had been served. But for those who loved Brittany, the sentence was only a line in a file. The real punishment was the empty space she left behind. In the months after the verdict, the noise faded. The reporters left, the search teams stood down, but for Brittany's family, life never returned to what it was. Her mother still speaks of her in the present tense, still drives past the street where volunteers once gathered, still keeps her daughter's photo near the door as a silent reminder of love and loss. The community remembers too. Each year, neighbors light candles and talk about safety, trust, and the quiet risks people take when trying to help others. Brittany's story became a warning, not against kindness, but against how easily it can be exploited. Investigators often say this case shows how technology, meant to connect us, can also confuse the trail. A phone in the wrong hands, a few misleading texts, enough to delay the truth for months. But the deeper question lingers. What turns someone capable of such harm against a person who only wanted to help? And how many others vanish in the same silence before anyone even realizes they're gone? Subscribe if you want the full story told in real time, and let us know what you think happened to make a kind woman vanish.